Welcome, 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 Liberty lovers. It is Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. My name is Matthew Struck. This is Why Libertarian, coming at you every single week, bringing you Liberty Live. We have a fantastic show this week. Before we get rolling, as usual, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, retweet, share this thing out there. Let it get to anyone who needs or would like to hear this message. So, as many of you know, I have been on a kick moving in the direction of decentralizing. I think a lot of people have been moving in that direction, and one of the locuses or the focuses of my path towards decentralization has been the Hive blockchain. We already had Matt and Dan, who were the co-founders of 3Speak, on a recent episode. If you did not catch that one, definitely check that one out. We have another guest that's going to give us a little bit more of a look behind the curtain, so to speak, or a little bit of a 101 session in terms of the Hive blockchain. So I'm really honored to have on Krim. Krim's coming from the beautiful Northwest, being Canada, our neighbor to the north. Is that right?
That is correct, over in BC.
Yes, beautiful West Coast Canada. You'd spent some time off grid. You had mentioned when we were talking just earlier how people have lost their damn minds in the last 4 days, pretty much, right?
And you know what? There's two things that happen every time I go camping off grid. And one is crypto pumps, and I'm not here to kind of keep an eye on it.
Yep.
And the other is something somewhere in it just kind of explodes in some way that impacts me negatively, usually.
Yes. Yeah, it's like if you're not minding the store, or if you're not there to see it happen, it still affects you when you get back. I mean, it's not like you're that far removed, unfortunately. But so on the topic of crypto, just in terms of, say, like your space within the ecosystem, how did you get into it? And then I understand this is going to be potentially a long answer, but how did you get into it? And then kind of what's your role right now in terms of like the Hive blockchain and the crypto world?
Oh yeah, okay. So that'll be a biggie. But to try and truncate it in a way that makes sense is I started out. I actually found ETH first. I was a little backwards. Probably in about 2015, I found ETH through a local group. Got into Bitcoin and ETH. And then, honestly, the Hive blockchain at the time was we call it the legacy code base. That's my term for it. It was actually the Steam blockchain. And we could talk a little bit later on about sort of how that hard birthed Hive. But the big thing that attracted me about it was, at the time, the way that it was being touted was earn crypto for participating in community and sharing content. And I'm a pretty creative person, but I'm also really interested in the way that social media impacts us, and obviously our place in the world and our place in politics and everything else. And, never think 4 years ago we would be where we are now, especially I'm not a US citizen, but obviously the US impacts the world, and your relationship with big media, big tech, social media has been very interesting this year. So, to
say the least.
Hive and blockchain and decentralized social media suddenly is really freaking important. And it's not necessarily the way that I saw it coming about, but maybe this was the inevitable. So in any case, I found this blockchain that was, write some posts, share some content, earn some crypto. Hell yeah. Absolutely. I would like to find ways to get deeper into crypto, to learn more, to meet like-minded people, and to do it in a way that isn't, traditional employment. I don't go show up somewhere and somebody's going to pay me crypto. I'm going to get involved directly at a blockchain level. So I started as a content creator, as a photographer. I had this cool idea. I'm going to share travel photos and earn a bunch of money. And you know what? That is true. That is where I started. But the reality was, as soon as I started interacting with people on the blockchain and starting to learn, where does this free money come from? What is crypto? Where are these magic internet beans? The more that I started getting involved in the technological side of it, it was sort of an inevitable spiral into becoming a node runner, and honestly having some impact on governance as well. So that's sort of where I'm at now. The Hive blockchain is considered DPoS, which is a type of proof of stake.
Yep.
And so, what that means is there's a group of consensus witnesses or block producers that essentially sort of run the programs that are the rules that does that. So that's really cool. It's a technological position, it's a community position, and it's part of sort of determining where the future of the Hive blockchain goes. And that to me is a really valuable thing. So I don't make a lot of content anymore. I've kind of transitioned largely into community. And volunteerism in the background, trying to kind of get more people understanding what is Hive, what's the potential of Hive, why is it important, and what does crypto and blockchain offer everyone in terms of the problems that they're trying to solve.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I think that is something that, like you said, it's always kind of like it's been percolating for a while, and it's the politics and the I'll call it the unrest or the easiness recently that has really kind of like sparked the move in that direction, right?
Yeah.
And whereas you might have been, say, like an early adopter because you could see the benefits and the value in the future. I think a lot of folks that weren't necessarily early adopters, but they're kind of like phase two, are now beginning to work their way into the ecosystem. So it's great that you mentioned witnesses in terms of, I think the context that we could put this in is, I think everyone fresh in their minds is Parler, internet censorship, Trump getting tossed from Twitter. Okay. And the pitch of decentralized social media and blockchain technology is that there's not necessarily some central authority that's going to say like, oh, this is offensive, we are going to cancel your account, and we're also going to make it like you never existed and take all of your posts away, right? So how is that juxtaposed with, say, witnesses like a witness that you're involved in? How does that kind of go towards making sure that things remain, I'll use quotes, orderly on the blockchain, but not necessarily result in censorship?
That's a really good question. And we're just going right for it, hey?
Yeah, no, let's go.
Well, and this is a really interesting thing that I've discovered over the last little bit, because as we kind of go out as community members who are really passionate about blockchain, social media, passionate about Hive, but let's kind of broaden that up a bit and just say, okay, blockchain or decentralized social media. As we go out and we talk to people on Twitter who've been deplatformed, or YouTube or Facebook or whatever big tech group is currently trying to quash whatever you're trying to say, a lot of people go, well, that's where all the crazy people are. That's where all the violent, horrible people are. And I can also understand how that happens, because
guns, coke, and hookers. That's all it is. Guns, coke, and hookers.
And you know what? If nothing else, it's going to be a hell of a party. So think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
All joking aside, it is, and I don't want to start one of those slippery slope arguments so early in the day, but it really is. These are topics that, even if you don't find them palatable, these are groups that, even if they're not your group, watching how they're treated by sort of the powers that be are really indicative of what's happening to you without you maybe knowing it. They're having to take some bigger steps to control some of the things that are happening. And you know what? Arguably, there absolutely should be measures in place for violence or hate speech, or, the things that really are dangerous to a community, whether a small one or a global one. Absolutely. And so one of the reasons that I really, I think Hive as a solution is really valuable is because there's an aspect of granularity to it. And what that means is you do have freedom of speech. You don't necessarily have freedom of consequence, but that freedom of consequence doesn't come in sort of the idea of this giant conglomerate is going to erase that you ever existed. And that's the part that really matters. So your question was basically, how do witnesses figure into this? And for somebody who's not super blockchain savvy, a witness is very much like a block producer, or as you might have kind of know of them if you're just getting your foot into the blockchain space, would be kind of like a miner. But if you're thinking about Bitcoin and mining Bitcoin, you've probably heard, okay, it's a big long math algorithm and, I have to solve it and then I get a reward that's coin.
Right.
DPoS or Hive or a proof of stake blockchain doesn't work quite the same. And so in the Hive ecosystem, there's something that we kind of refer to as consensus. And that means there's an elected group of witnesses, and they are elected by the stakeholders. And there are 20 of them plus one. And they basically have to form consensus on decisions that impact the blockchain. So what that means is there's not one big Twitter witness that goes, "Ooh, Matt, nope, you're out of here," and then you're gone.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. There has to be an agreement between all of these witnesses to run the same software. And stakeholders have the ability to impact who the people in that position are. So if you're someone who holds a lot of Hive or has, a staked interest in the Hive blockchain, then you can vote block producer that aligns with sort of what you want to see happening on the blockchain. Right. And because there are 20 of those, forming consensus is actually a little more difficult than you think. Now, obviously, we're in consensus all the time. The blockchain is still moving forward. But given sort of Hive's goals and the types of people who are node running and who are interested in blockchain, what it means is we have a real diversity of opinions in block producers. Most people are very technological minded, and most people are real fans and proponents of decentralization. So the big thing is, how do we create this blockchain that is this open, transparent, immutable ledger? How do we allow you to transact value without fees, fast, anywhere in the world? And how do we give you a tool set to build whatever it is you want to build to communicate or use blockchain or social? But it's not our place as witnesses to decide, no, we just don't like this one guy and he's the out here. The potential is there, but arguably, if that was ever acted on, either stakeholders or the entire community would pick up and walk away. And we know that's true because literally how Hive was created.
Yeah. I love that's a fantastic transition, because I think a lot of people have they don't necessarily get the concept because it's completely new in the fact that they try and think about this stuff. It's almost like so like I was raised religious. I'm not very much religious now, but I was raised religious, right? And one of the precepts of certain religions is like, it's beyond your understanding, right? Like you just kind of have to have faith that this is the way it works. Right. I think a lot of people take the world as they know it, which is centralized. It's what they're used to, and they try and apply that logic to this. And you have to understand that it's not going to get you to understand how this works. This is like, and it's almost like, would you liken it to like almost like an organic entity? It's like a living, breathing being, right? Like the story behind Steem and how the hard fork happened with Hive is something that made me actually reassured. I think some people would look at it and they'd be like, oh my God, there was this like civil war, and we don't necessarily have to get, or not a civil war, but there was like a disconnect of trust, right? But that really kind of compelled me to be like, you know what, I'm actually inspired that the folks that are behind Hive like legitimately said, no, we do not want centralization of any sort on this platform. And it's like the true believers were like, nope, this is the principle. We're sticking to it. And if it means that we have to, part ways with the former, whatever brand or existence or whatnot that we had with Steem, so be it. We're doing it. So what did that look like? What is a hard fork? Okay, like 101. What's a hard fork? And what kind of led up to that?
Well, and I mean, one of the big things about Hive that I've certainly discovered is we are kind of constantly looking back at that event as our genesis. And it's an important part of our story and our branding. And it's so important to kind of underlining the passion of the people in our ecosystem. But I also think that we're a year in now. As of February 14th, that was when the news first broke. Justin Sun was buying Steem and Inc. And, it was a thing, and there was a bunch of confusion. And, Justin Sun, isn't everybody's favorite guy in the crypto world, shall we say. So, that wasn't 100% working in his favor. And there is this incredibly passionate love and protectiveness that was around Steam and is around Hive, and probably is still around Steam too now. And so it really was this catalyst for a bunch of people to say, whoa, what is happening here is pretty threatening of what we believe we want this blockchain to become.
Yep.
And so without focusing too much on that event, because God damn it, Justin Sun, if there's one thing he's good at, it's getting his name in everybody's mouth all the time. So,
we can move on. It's all right.
I'm just saying, there are absolutely things we could learn from him. But a hard fork, let's kind of look at this as an important part of understanding the blockchain ecosystem, for sure. And like you said, it's something that kind of gave you a little bit of almost assurance and security in that anything I build here, the potential for me to pick it up, take it, evolve it, shape it, and with a community around can't be taken away. And that's the super valuable part. So what a hard fork is essentially when you're moving along one branch of code. So we're moving on the Steam blockchain, we're moving forward block by block, the blockchain is being created. A hard fork is essentially changing the code in such a way that it branches off. So when you think of a fork, often like what's the road less traveled by? A fork road is actually a great way of visualizing it for yourself. You've decided this direction that we're headed with this code, it's not going to work. We want to do something a little bit different. So we're going to flip over and we're going to take our own fork. We're going to have the same history leading up to this point, but we're going to branch off in a new direction, potentially new rules, potentially new anything. But the code is going to change from this point forward, and we're going to be a whole new entity. So that's what a hard fork is we were Steam, we exist in almost exact harmony with Steam, but we're going to go do things our way. So Steam has continued on as Steam, Hive has continued on as Hive, and they've moved in very different directions since the split. But the big thing to kind of keep in mind is that because this was a hard fork, there was a new blockchain created, a new asset, a new path, a new repository. And what that means is this group from Hive could say, we don't like what you're doing, and we want to build something different without actually taking anything away, destroying anything, or really doing anything to anyone on Steam.
Right.
And so that's really valuable, because the idea is, if Hive did run into some situation in the future where you've built something on this blockchain and you're like, you know what, I don't want to deal with any of this, you could essentially fork it and do your own thing. Now, ideally, we'd like to see an ecosystem where everybody feels compelled to build and create and sort of transact value, whether that's in a monetary sense or a social sense. But you're right, having that possibility there really matters, because you can't do that with Twitter. You don't just wake up tomorrow morning, fork Twitter, and just continue on with the same amount of followers. It's not how it works.
I think after what happened to Trump, I think a lot of people woke up and said, fork Twitter.
It's true. It's so true. And that was sort of a big thing. That was a big catalyst for people to start saying, whoa, I mean, if it can happen to him, can it happen to me? And the answer is yeah, absolutely it can. And people get disappeared on Twitter all the time. And, they're not just right-leaning. They're not just left-leaning. Sometimes it's literally, accidentally, smash the keyboard like a monkey, and you come up with the right combination of words that trigger some algorithm, and you're gone, you're banned.
Yep.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Nobody cares that you're gone.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And that's an extremely good point, is in their erasure, right, of basically your existence on their platform, there is no legacy there either. So like they have zero accountability as the platform, right? Like they can do whatever they want, which, as someone who's a believer in free markets, yes, you should be able to do whatever you want, right? But at the same time, if I have a provider who's competing against that, who's going to give me transparency, that's going to say, our 20 witnesses looked at this, and I think consensus is 13. Is it 13 or 15? What's usually the consensus?
It depends on what type of fork it is.
Okay.
But let's talk about in terms of a hard fork, because what a hard fork is irreversible changes to the code. You
Yep.
can't go back and change something happened in the ledger without a hard fork. So we would need something called a supermajority. It would be 17 plus 1 out of 21.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot of people to get to agree, believe me.
Yeah,
It doesn't sound like it.
Just get 21 members of your family around the Thanksgiving table or around a holiday table and try and get 17 plus 1 to agree on anything, right? Like, I think that's, people would understand how difficult that is, right? But, so yeah, I think in that context, if someone's out there providing transparency that goes with that decision-making process, I think that's already a +1 in the column of any decentralized opportunity that's out there, right? In addition to that, in terms of when that fork happens, the Hive community, the believers, felt like or were compelled to do that, right? Because you essentially had a consolidation of the key witnesses in the older legacy Steam blockchain that at the very least endangered that decentralization, right? And I think in some cases I've heard, may even have resulted in some activity that was not in line with the way things were operating before. And to your point, I would love to get your opinion on this. Like, Jack from Twitter has already talked about, oh yeah, well, we have every intent of exploring, like a blockchain type Twitter. Like, is that blockchain Twitter really going to be blockchain? Like, is it going to be decentralized Twitter in your estimation?
This is such a fascinating topic, because I kind of, like, a small part of me really does believe that Jack is a big believer, but, he's built this behemoth. He's built this colossus that is now almost stronger than he is. Yeah. And so, the Blue Sky Project, there was a report released a little bit earlier, maybe about a month ago, and they had actually looked at Steam and a bunch of others. Hive was quite new. So I think there's kind of like this, well, Hive and Steam, smash it into one thing in this report. And they basically said, well, it doesn't have everything that we want. And so their idea is, well, we're gonna work with experienced protocol makers, and we're going to make an open protocol. And the idea is simply that you should be able to share anything from anywhere to anywhere else. And then the person on the receiving end can decide, do they want to consume that content or not? Now, that's a freaking lofty goal. And that's certainly, it's something that arguably Hive kind of actually already empowers within Hive's network. So you can talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of, do I think it's actually going to happen? Is there going to be a blockchain style Twitter? If it does, I suspect it will become its own ledger. I mean, I base that on absolutely nothing other than observing how blockchains work and actually kind of speaking to some people adjacent to work at Blue Sky Project. Is they're looking for something that potentially already exists. They haven't found it, so they're going to have to build it. And I guess the idea that comes along with that is, can we build something again that becomes the one, the Highlander of protocols, I don't know. Given sort of how Twitter and some of these other big tech giants have evolved, it's going to be way harder this time around. It really is. Yeah. And
I want to address that. And before I do that, so Matt made a comment or a question here. When will you fork over to Hive? Why aren't you live on Free Speak right now? So Matt's actually, I believe, watched one of my earlier videos and went over and started to set up an account. I'm actually working right now on kind of like this how-to series, right, in getting set up. And so that's what I have to roll out. And so I've been a little bit of a delinquent in terms of getting that out there. But as soon as I do roll that out, the very next step is taking a lot of my content, and then like a very long weekend will be dedicated towards putting a lot of that stuff onto the Hive blockchain. So, to that point, and kind of like speaking about, like Twitter and whether or not it can exist in this ecosphere or compete against the other blockchains that are out there. Here's the one thing that they're going to run into. they are not going to have, or at the very least, at the beginning, they won't have centralized government authority that will give them a leg up on the other blockchains that are out there. And
Yeah.
so that's the one thing that I love is just the story of the hard fork and kind of me talking to Matt and Dan from Three Speak and talking kind of about their perspective about how things played out and really where they're going. The beauty of this is maybe even like I'm not saying this as like a bad thing. Like Hive might not be there in 12 or 18 or 24 or 36 months. It might if it continues to evolve and it continues to be competitive, if it attracts really good content creators where people congregate, right? But the ecosphere of blockchain is like true free market. It's like we have a blockchain, they have a blockchain, there's some go-betweens, right? And it's like whoever can outcompete the others or at least can exist within like their lane within the blockchain marketplace will have a future and be successful. And you know what? If you get uppity and you try and centralize the authority, we're gonna take you down, right? Like, or if someone else comes up with something that is more competitive in terms of the code or the technology, there's the opportunity to partner, to move over, to like, whereas now, like your point is completely spot on. Like, blockchain Twitter will not have the leg up that traditional Web 2.0 Twitter had. It just won't, right? Like, and so to that point, I'm reassured because, one of the libertarian talking points, I would love to hear your thoughts on this one. One of the libertarian talking points is a free market means that the government can't assist companies in creating monopolies.
Yep.
Do you see that playing out in the blockchain market space, like the good way?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. And one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about Hive is because you kind of have to think of it as the backbone of a network that you really can't stop anyone from building on. And that's the part that's really valuable, because we think of, okay, let's think about the really valuable infrastructure that exists that powers all these giant social media companies. Imagine for a second if Twitter and Facebook, and I'm like, I don't even use that much social media, so I always come back to these as examples, but whatever, all of them, if they all worked from the same database, let's say that, your followers on YouTube were the same followers that were on Twitter, were the same followers that were on Facebook, and, all of a sudden that infrastructure was available to whoever wanted to build on it. So I could come along and I could build on the same database that Twitter is using. Holy crap, that'd be amazing. Well, that's not how this works.
Yep.
And that's the part of that free market access that you're talking about that's really missing, because these days, the government can step in and be like, oh, no, this is yours and nobody else can have it. Enjoy. Yeah. Well, that's the exact opposite of what Hive is really about. Hive is it's very much an open database that you can use however you want. And that's what makes it so valuable, especially for people who are looking for censorship resistance, or that immunity. Not everybody's looking for that, and that's A-okay. But the features that come with that shared network, that shared database, that underlying blockchain, you're right, they can't really be manipulated by an outside government. That information is stored on nodes run by people like me who have, I've got 3 boxes, 3 different servers that are all running this. They're spread out over the planet. The other consensus witnesses do that. There are, at any given time right now, about 400 different witness boxes running. What happens when somebody, let's just say, they come for me, the van comes and I'm gone, and all of a sudden, my nodes are no longer monitored. Well, somebody else in that giant pile of consensus moves up. Somebody in the back, those backup witnesses moves up, takes my place. No big deal. The blockchain doesn't care. Honey Badger doesn't care. Yeah. And that matters because for you, as somebody who's built on this blockchain, your followers are still, copies of them are spread out all over the world. We all have to agree. These are your followers. No one person could come be like, oh, deplatformed. They're gone. That community you built, that effort you built, those people who want to connect with you, there's not a middleman who can sever that connection. And so a lot of people think of this as like, well, this is how, those bad people are going to communicate. This is where the criminals go. No, it's as simple as if you are, pursuing something like holistic medicine, or you're interested in creating an incredibly niche group, and every time you make a Reddit, it gets locked, or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
You still have all that information locked in the blockchain and you can access it.
Yeah.
So where there's going to be sort of the answer to how do we keep that orderliness, I think is what you used sort of early today, is that front ends do have control. And for me, I love decentralization. I think it really matters. But as somebody who wants to see effective social media and effective tools and effective apps and services, and I want to see people like my mom being able to use this, or, you're going to need some centralized tool sets. And that's a cool part of Hive is I can build on this infrastructure. I could create whatever app I want, whatever front end I want. I can make my own rules and terms and conditions. But what you put into that blockchain, maybe I decide you broke all my rules and I'm not going to allow you to access, this front end anymore. Doesn't matter, because like you're talking about, you can memory hold. We can't go backwards and erase you. And in fact, you could go to another front end and pull everything that you've already done, all those followers, your comments, your content. It's still there. You still existed. And that might be bad for you. If you've done something crappy and the community says, wow, you're horrible, you're going to have to own that because it's locked into the blockchain. You can't just erase that and rewrite history for good or for bad, but that idea of, can we use parts of centralized tool sets on decentralized infrastructure to build a hybrid that's really going to be great? And the answer is that's what Hive's about.
Yeah. And I think that's fantastic. That's a fantastic explanation, because from that standpoint, people are used to a centralized world where, again, just taking Twitter or even YouTube or Facebook as an example, they are the front end, they are the middleman, they are the data set, right? They may share data sets behind the scenes, but they're not freely available to anyone who wants to create another front end to compete with Facebook and use your data set, right? It's Facebook's data set, which in the decentralized world, your data set is your data set. You can take it wherever you want, or at the very least, it lives on the blockchain and you can access it however you want. Right. So
it's connected to you.
So I think that's a really interesting difference there that people might not necessarily totally kind of understand. The one example I would make is, so like anyone who's like, again, this is not going to appeal to someone who's like 30 or younger, but if anyone understands computer technology, okay, and you remember kind of like the way things used to be with mainframes, where you had a terminal where you could access the mainframe, and the mainframe was like basically the central storage and processing unit. That terminal that you have, the terminal could be blue, it could be red, it could be in your living room, it could be down the street, but that terminal gets to go to the mainframe and pull that data regardless of how you want to access it, right? And I think that's an important distinction. Now, the other distinction is, because you own your data, you make money off of your content creation. And it's not money that, say, like, YouTube is making a VIG off of the way that they do right now. It is content that you own that content, and now you're earning crypto and other kinds of consideration for that. What does that look like? Like, how does that play out?
Yeah, the rewards pool is one aspect of Hive, and it's not necessarily the main aspect, especially these days. We found the blockchain ecosystem is really evolving, and what people want is the ability to transact value, for sure. But you're right in that, especially kind of to this point, and still a large part of people's sort of, I like to call Hive the gateway crypto, because very rarely, hear me out, because very rarely do people kind of just go, well, and dive into mining Bitcoin, because that's hard. It's doable, it's attainable, but it's not what the average person is going to do.
Right.
But you are very likely to be on Facebook or Twitter every day. You might be blogging, you might have your own site on WordPress. There are some actions that you take in sort of a social sense where you are transacting value as it matters to you. Your stories, your connections with the people around you, your hobbyist group for knitted tea cozies. There's a value in that, and you are transacting it in a way on social media. So when we come to the blockchain, Hive has this thing called the rewards pool, and essentially is an inflationary currency. And part of that inflation is, hey, if you're a stakeholder on Hive, you get to actually decide which content earns some crypto. It's not a ton, and it's split up between everybody who's interacting with the blockchain in that way, creating content, day to day. That daily pool gets allocated by stakeholders. So you could come and you could write a long story, and you might be brand new to the blockchain. Maybe nobody sees it because nobody knows you. It would be no different than if you went to YouTube and you put up your first video and you didn't make any ad money because nobody saw it. So there's sort of this misconception that it's like, well, I'll just go there, I'll shit out my grandma's recipe for lasagna and I'll make $1 million internet dollars.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work that way. But yeah, there is absolutely mechanisms built into the blockchain that if you wanted to really kind of sit down and build a viewership or a community or whatever, just like you're doing now with YouTube or your Twitch stream or, your syndicated WordPress blog, all of these things that you're doing, here's a place that gives you some of these tools to kind of protect that work that you've done, to allow it to live on and be decentralized, knowing that something could happen. Where did MySpace went the way of the dodo? So there you go.
Yep.
I'm dating myself.
I'm pretty sure my MySpace page, if it was still a thing, would be active somewhere with my top 10 playlist from the 90s.
Yeah, that under construction GIF from that time period, the little rotating Yeah, for sure. But, just protecting you're future-proofing yourself in some ways. You're hardening up that work and that value that, let's just kind of take dollars out of it for a second. Value that is, I built up a bunch of people who came, they found me, they want to hear what I have to say. They've created a connection between us because they like my stuff. You're protecting that. Somebody else can't take that away. And then, the Hive blockchain, in a couple different ways, has the ability to allow people to, transact value. I like what you did. I do want to allocate you some crypto for that. I want to tip you, or I want to vote for you. I want to curate this content and have you earn some crypto rewards. And of course, the possibility to say, tokenize a community. I mean, there is the possibility to use a second layer on the Hive blockchain to create a node token. You could be a Y variant token. And all of your most involved viewers, they earn this token based on whatever you like. Maybe it's how frequently they comment on your stuff or how much watch time. You could give them this token. They could trade it in for merch or whatever the case may be. So all of a sudden, these ways of what does value look like? How do I earn it? How do I share it with others? You have some control, which you didn't have before, because YouTube has that control. Facebook has that control. Twitter has that control. And so it's doable on a personal level, but it's also doable on a platform level as well. And what I mean by that is, we talk a lot about those algorithms that just disappear you if you say the wrong thing, because they exist and they don't have a lot of oversight. In a lot of ways, it's not even because Twitter is this hateful, evil government corporation, which, we'll just truth
we'll leave
or
that
not.
Where it is. Yeah.
Truth or not, even if it wasn't, there's so much happening on Twitter. Stop and think for a second how many people tweet at any second. That is a crap load of content. And the same thing can happen on Hive. And so those tool set allow you to kind of filter this fire hose. What are you interested in? Is it based on followers? Maybe I'm going to create a front end that only looks for libertarian content. Maybe I'm going to, and so all of a sudden you have this fire hose of the entire world's content in front of you. But unlike Facebook, where you're stuck, thanks, Mark, where you're stuck waiting for them to kind of spoon feed you what they think is valuable, what will earn them money, what they think you want to see, there is the potential for you to just build your own portal. What
Right.
do I want to see? I'll literally query only that and I'll see it. And for somebody who's really techy, that's incredibly valuable. For somebody who wants to start a business or who has a great idea for an app, that's incredibly valuable. And for somebody who has no tech leanings whatsoever, it's still very valuable because you can go to one of the existing front ends and kind of build your own feed and just live in that space. And again, not worry about this giant fire hose. So it's exciting to me that is so accessible for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that self-ownership is, I think it can't be understated, because that self-ownership of kind of like the data and the accessibility to the data is something that is so foreign to the way that we live right now. And
Totally.
it's almost a shame, because I think just no one saw, like only a handful of people saw it coming, what we have now, right? Like
Yeah.
there was a handful of people that were like, whoa, like hold on, we got to pump the brakes, because if they have a monopoly on, people's data that's on their platform, or even these dark pools of data that are shared behind the scenes and not necessarily transparent, we got all of a sudden all of these problems. Like it opens up Pandora's box. Blockchain solves a lot of that because of the transparency, the accessibility, and the self-ownership, right? And so a lot of people that may watch this and follow me and other people like me, they're big on self-ownership, because
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
the and to your point, there's also a truth serum effect. So on the blockchain, if you put out crap, like not
Mm-hmm.
very many people are going to follow you.
Yep.
And you can't necessarily buy your way into prevalence on the blockchain, right? So let me ask you this. Would you ever see a situation where, like, if all of a sudden Coca-Cola's like, we're going to establish a community and a place on the Hive blockchain, and we are just going to dominate everyone's front end with Coca-Cola advertising, right? Is that even possible on the blockchain, on the Hive blockchain?
It's a great theoretical question because, either way you answer it, there's going to be some people, especially free market loving people, who are like, ooh, but I want to do that.
Yeah.
Certainly yes and no, but let's look at this in terms of like buying advertising, the way that we think of it now.
Yep.
And that is very sort of, it's a business to business interaction. And with the front ends that exist, of course, if they want to have advertising, they can. 3Speak does have some advertising now, which is very smart. Leo Finance is another front end that has advertising. That's always going to be part of the model that a front end will use to monetize themselves, right? That's fine. No big deal. But in terms of like, could I use the blockchain to guarantee that a post that I make gets into your feed and you have to see it? The answer is absolutely not, which is freaking cool. If you want, you can build a following, whoever I follow, and I just look at my followed feed. Those are the people I see. And it's up to a front end to sort of inject advertising in that. If I don't like what a front end is doing, I'm going to use another front end. If I don't like what any of those front ends are doing, I'll just read it on, a block explorer with no fripper content I want and see it exactly as it was put in the blockchain.
Right.
Now, that's not always going to be awesome because for somebody, we like our comfortable user interfaces. We like attractive, easy to use apps. But the reality is this is one of these things where if you want to compete, if you decide I'm going to sell out to Coca-Cola and I'm going to put these ads and I'm going to boost their content to the top and I'm going to create this, algorithm that exists on Facebook where every second frickin' post is going to be a Coke bottle shoved up my nose.
Right.
People aren't going to use that front end.
Yeah.
And the posts that they know are going into that database that powers that front end, they could still get to them. There's really no content that any one front end has to get a leg up on another. And so what that means is you have to build a good front end. You have to build you have to build tools that empower people to create the social experience that they want to have. Because if you don't have that, people aren't going to use it. if I have a choice between front ends and one has reasonable advertising for topics that are roughly adjacent to what I'm interested in, or one is a corporate disaster mess that's showing me content that I didn't really choose or consent to, I'm simply not going to use that front end.
Yeah.
That's really, really interesting because right now, if I want this content from Facebook, I have to go to Facebook and I have to take that content in the form that they provide it to me. Well, that's not how blockchain social media works. And that's very cool.
Yeah, no, I love that aspect of it. It's also how should I put it? It's a means for also getting better advertising, if that kind of makes sense, right?
Totally.
Because the right now, if you pump enough money behind it, like I think a lot of people, regardless of which area of politics you're in, they look at advertising and they're like, holy crap, like news and advertising are an extension of certain types of narratives. And in a lot of cases, you feel like you're entrapped into being broadcast that message when if you had your choice, you wouldn't look at it. Like you'd see the first 5 seconds, be like, nope, I don't want to see this. I want to move on to something else. It puts the onus on companies, organizations, political organizations to actually create content in the form of marketing content that is now high value and high quality, as opposed to, fits a narrative and they're just going to put enough money behind it so that everyone sees it. And so to a certain extent, I mean, that democratizes advertising as well. It means you could be Joe's Electric Shop in Peoria, Illinois. And if you create an amazing post or an amazing advertisement or video and people are like, this is incredible, like people have to see this. And specifically people that have, like you said, a stake in the actual blockchain and the content that's carried there, like it's going to travel. You don't need to be Coca-Cola. You could be Joe's Electric Shop, right? Like, that's something that really appeals to me because I think something that people miss right now is who you see, whether it's on TV or in your social media feeds and stuff like that, is probably not who's putting the best content out. Right?
Oh, for sure.
In some cases it could be, but I think in the vast majority of it, it has little to do with the actual performance and the quality, and more so to do with some other aspects of doing business that have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not they're out competing their competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that, like that kind of like the philosophical like idea of blockchain and kind of like what's floating out there. Let me ask you this. So one thing that was presented to me when it was recommended for you to come on was the concepts of Hive core and NFT projects. All right.
Oh,
so
yeah.
So just kind of in general, layman's 101, right? Like what exactly is Hive core, and what's like a good example of like one of the NFT projects that are out there?
Sure, and that's nepotistic because I have one. So, like full disclosure. But let's kind of talk about Hive core first, and that is sort of the main function of the blockchain. It's what keeps things moving forward. It is the core code that determines how the blockchain runs, and in this case, it's what the witnesses run. So each node that sort of contributes to the blockchain and moving forward and creating the ledger, that is determined by Hive core code. It's literally what makes the blockchain the blockchain. So the rules that all of this information that's being dumped into the blockchain is governed by. Okay. Now, NFTs could be done core level, but one of the cool things about the Hive ecosystem is we have this burgeoning layer 2. Now, layer 2 is kind of a weird concept, especially if you're new to blockchain. But the idea is the core blockchain has information stored in it, and there's that core level. Layer 2 is basically saying, well, I'm going to build an additional layer on top of the blockchain. And I'm going to put key information into the ledger, but I'm also going to build beyond that. And so a layer two in this case would be creating a smart contract or a token that has all of its relevant information stored inside the Hive blockchain. So it has all of the benefits of, what makes Hive great. It's fast, it's free, it's immutable, it's censorship resistant, all of that good jazz.
Yep.
But it also kind of lives in its own ecosystem and it follows its own sets of rules, and lives on a different level above Hive. And so what that means is, for example, you have a number of different types of NFTs that exist in the Hive ecosystem. Some of them are quite legitimately tokens, like we talked about, community tokens. So, for example, probably one of the biggest and kind of most successful ones out there right now is a token called Leo. And it is a group of people who are super stoked on crypto, investing, fiat, finance, all of the things that come with monetary policy and sort of the monetary ecosystem of our world. Well, they've decided we're going to build a community around that type of content. And we're going to kind of transact in our own token. We're going to reward with this token. We're going to have different use cases for it, whether it is to buy advertising or to use any of our projects. And so all of a sudden, not only are you getting the benefits of that core Hive blockchain, you're also participating in a second layer ecosystem, an NFT ecosystem, if you want to kind of call it that, a tokenized ecosystem that, like you were saying before, relevancy for advertising or content isn't always really based on you or your interests. It's based on who has the most money. Well, here is a voluntary ecosystem with its own token that is created on the Hive blockchain that kind of lives in its own niche and uses all of the benefits of Hive, but also creates its own space to attract more people. That's really cool. And that's sort of that token, that creating of a new token, one aspect of layer two. But NFTs, it means non-fungible token. And so when we think of like fungible things, usually it comes in the form of money. We think of, I have a $1 bill, you have a $1 bill. If we trade each other $1 bills, we both recognize that this is worth the same. My $1 bill, your $1 bill, doesn't matter. Mine's pretty crumply. Yours went through the wash, but we trade them and we just agree they're worth the same thing. They can take each place. They're fungible. A non-fungible token is a token that doesn't necessarily have the same value as another. And so what this means is the core Hive blockchain, each Hive token, one Hive is one Hive. They're fungible. I could trade you for that. But an NFT built on the Hive blockchain, any two NFTs aren't necessarily the same. They're not just tradable easily. And so in the crypto space, one of the sort of things that's been exploding in terms of NFTs has been either game assets or art. Crypto art is huge now. It's taking off. And if you've had any sort of experience with the ETH ecosystem, especially, NFTs are honestly kind of solely thought of as art, tokens tied to crypto art, digital art, physical art. And that's a really sort of well-matched space. That is a great way to say, here's a piece of artwork, here's an idea, a concept creation, and it's tied to a token. And that token I can give to you. And it represents, that you have ownership of this. It's locked in the blockchain. It can be transferred by you to anyone that you want. You have sort of sole dominion. Everyone can see it and interact with it and enjoy it, but it is absolutely yours, and you can trace it from inception to wherever it is now. And so the what I'm involved in actually is NFT Showroom, which is an art project built on the Hive blockchain. So, like full disclosure there. But what I mean is that it's already starting to happen, and we have a lot of different NFT projects that are already starting to grow on the Hive blockchain, and more options for creating that are kind of coming to life right now too, which is very exciting for people who are looking for places to create communities or to do some of this monetization or to do some of this building, because you can just dive in and do it.
So in terms of NFT Showroom, I think hopefully this is your homepage.
That is it. Yes.
Okay, awesome. And so it's just nftshowroom.com. So if anyone's looking for it. And so I love the idea of tokenization, because most people equate currency right now to fiat, right? Like they think of a dollar or, the Canadian loonie or a pound or a euro as
Nobody
being
thinks of the
currency.
Canadian loonie.
Well, that's
Come
true.
on now. It's
um,
worth like, I don't know, 33 cents and some pocket lint, I think.
yeah. The pocket lint is negotiable, I've heard. But so that being said, most people think of like government issued currency or fiat currency as actual money, right?
Yep.
What I love about the blockchain ecosystem is that you have these core cryptocurrencies that other tokenized currencies can then derive their value from, right?
Yep.
So like for instance, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but say I'm really active on the Leo platform and
Yes.
I'm a contributor and I'm contributing content that's actively put onto, in the Leo finance community, and I'm earning, Leo tokens. I can then convert those Leo tokens back into Hive, right?
Yep.
And then I could use them within the Leo finance ecosystem to buy something, merch or products or whatever, right? Or I could also convert it back into Hive, which is more of kind of that core currency that it derives its value from. And the beauty is that the way currency used to be, I would say, and again, I'm dating myself, but we're talking early 20th century, right? The way currency used to be was there was a direct correlation between the productivity of a country or an organization that was issuing it and the amount of currency that was in circulation.
Yep.
We've parted ways with that. The Federal Reserve System and centralized banking authorities like obliterated that. It's like,
Big oof.
who cares if we're more productive? Just print another $1 trillion, right?
Yeah.
And so this brings that back to more of a foundational concept of currency, where you
Yeah.
have, Hive, which would be analogous to, say, the amount of gold in circulation or the amount of platinum. And then you have a currency that derives its value based off of a regulated, the volume of that digital asset is regulated, and now you're producing it. So, say tomorrow Leo Finance, and again, sorry if anyone from Leo watches this or you're watching this, okay? I'm not saying that you're going to do this, right? But if all of a sudden they decide to adopt a standard that creates tons of Leo tokens, right? The amount of Leo tokens in supply increasing dramatically effectively reduces the value because there's a direct correlation between Leo and the underlying Hive, which is basically what it's deriving its value from. Am I kind of explaining that correctly?
Well, yes and no, because one of the nice things is there is that aspect of it, 100%, but one of the really interesting things, and like big shout out to the Leo team, is that at times the Leo token has been more than the Hive token, and actually is probably right now. And so what is kind of interesting is that you can have as much attachment back to Hive as you want, because a lot of people in the Leo ecosystem, they are starting to really explore cool stuff. They're wrapping Leo and they're putting it on ETH, markets through the DEX, and they're exploring all sorts of things. And so, in a way, Leo is in no way, shape, or form actually reliant on Hive doing well as a currency. And they're still building this cool, powerful ecosystem that has its own token and is really exciting and is drawing content creators. And people are starting to build, more sort of app and experiences inside that ecosystem. They don't need to worry about the price of Hive, but the sort of structure of Hive is what gives Leo a lot of the features that allow it to be so strong. So we know Hive is fast. We know it's feeless. We know all of those sort of benefits that come from the Hive blockchain, regardless of what the Hive token is valued at.
Right.
Those really empower Leo to be awesome, but then Leo can also build on that base core level. They can build from level 2 and then take off. And that's what they're doing. They're springboarding this token that they're using all of the benefits and power of Hive
Yeah.
and creating an ecosystem that's actually worth even more because they've got a narrower focus, they've got a dedicated team, and a really great sort of niche that's a great match for what's happening. Crypto, posts about crypto and fiat and economics obviously are a great match for earning crypto.
Yeah.
And the same thing is happening, like you talked to the Three Speak guys. Well, they're going to be doing something really similar. They're going to be tokenizing an ecosystem, and sort of building using all of the base awesomeness of Hive, the technical term, but using all these base features that are available to them, and then creating an ecosystem on top of it that allows them to do whatever the heck they want. And so, yeah, you're right. There is some value that comes to these tokens from being built on Hive, but they're not restricted to only what happens with the Hive token. They're able to say, okay, I'm going to use all this infrastructure. I'm going to get all of these benefits, and I'm driven to create a token, a transaction of value that people are going to be drawn to and roll with it.
Yeah.
And so that's really exciting.
That's
in a lot of ways.
That's interesting because all right, so let me refine the imagery a little bit. So it's not a perfect example because again the technology and the setup is completely different than we're used to, right? But so like for example, if we use kind of like the blockchain, the crypto environment, right? Like you have things like Ethereum, Steam, Hive, Bitcoin, whatever. There's literally dozens and dozens of cryptocurrencies that have different algorithms or means by which they're created and destroyed, right? Mostly created. Those have kind of, I guess I'll call definitive terms in the way that they are created. And so their value is derived from that, process, whatever it is, solving the Bitcoin blockchain or it's not called Bitcoin. It's called, what's the blockchain that's based off of? It's called Komodo or something like that. I don't know. I forget. I'm sorry. But so anyway, so like solving the blockchain derives, the new issuance of a new Bitcoin, right? Or other blockchains have different processes by which those new coins are created. You can then create this secondary market or secondary system of value tokens that are derived from something that's not just the algorithm of how, say, the blockchain is solved, right? So it could be derived from total number of posts, total number of view time, amount of view time, right? And so there's the potential there for a productivity element. When I was talking to Matt from Three Speak, he was like, "Yeah, I don't know if he's got a thing for Beyonce or whatnot, but he was like, yeah, like Beyonce could have like a Beyonce token, right? Like, and I don't know, like I don't know if you've met him and talked to him a lot or what, but like."
I was gonna say Matt and women go hand in hand. So I have no doubt. But he is an absolute delight. Yes, I haven't seen him in about a year now. Stupid COVID. But I think the most important thing, and you touched on it when we started sort of this little train of thought, was fiat and sort of the way that we understand fiat was I am productive inside my ecosystem. I am traded for the value of my work, with this fiat currency. There is directly these work hours correlate to this much fiat. That's an understanding of where that value comes from. Not anymore. And so, one of the best places to start, whether you're a Bitcoin maxi or not, is a book called The Bitcoin Standard, because it really talks about how we kind of moved from glass beads and seashells, to fiat, and now where we're moving beyond that. And it is a great it's a great base for shifting our thinking a little bit. And really, for a lot of people, I obviously didn't study economics, but crypto has forced me to become really interested in this. And part of that is being a little bit libertarian. And part of that is kind of, yes, the Bitcoin Standard, fabulous, highly recommended. It should be required reading for anybody, whether you expect that you're going to hold Bitcoin as your only crypto, or whether you care about crypto at all, even if you're a gold bug or whatever. There's a lot of interesting concepts that come from that will really change the way you think. about what money is and how value is transacted. And so the reason that I bring this up is because you said, well, fiat came from the idea of productivity correlated directly to value. And so, yeah, the Hive blockchain has a set of rules. The Hive token has a set of rules, and its value in general is, supply and demand and what you can do with the Hive that you have. That's the general sort of way that value comes out of any crypto token. But the nice thing becomes, if you're building on the second layer, now value is whatever you and I agree that it is. So I want to build a new token, and this token directly represents part of our relationship, whatever that relationship is. So to me, I always use knitted tea cozies. It's kind of a thing. All my listeners know this as well. And it's really obnoxious, but they're getting used to it. So you and me, we know that a good knitted tea cozy, that's the tits. We all need one. And I knit them. You want one. We're going to transact for something that's valuable to you. It's valuable to me. That's how it's going to work. So if we had this little place where we created them, we shared our patterns, we talked about the best way to insulate them, and we built this bumpin' little community full of knitted tea cozy enthusiasts. We created a token directly tied to our knowledge, our content, and we gave it a set of rules about how circulation was going to be and how we transact it. People who want knitted tea cozies are going to also find that valuable. So this community all of a sudden has an alternative to fiat that makes sense for a transaction of value. I don't want $1. I want a post about a knitted tea cozy, or I have a knitted tea cozy and I want to trade you a knitted tea cozy token for it. And so all of a sudden, this becomes a way to create really valuable marketplaces, because people gather is where value and transactions happen. It's natural. Markets arise from where people gather. And where people gather now is different than what we used to do. We don't gather at community centers or churches anymore because, we're all going to die. But, tongue-in-cheek nonsense aside, the internet changed that a long time ago. And where we gather and how we create marketplaces, it's very digital now. And the expanse of people that we have to trade with is very different than it used to be, and so that means you can agree on really weird niche forms of value, and you don't need a government to tell you anything about it. You agree on it. I agree on it. We have a set of rules, the blockchain, and we're happy to transact that way. So everybody else can butt out. And that's a really cool thing, because we now have the potential for people to really start exploring what value above and beyond the monetary that can bring to a community.
Yeah. And what's funny is it's kind of come full circle in that respect, right? So like, what's the original example? The original example is like cocoa beans or whatever, right? In terms of tracking the means for the transfer of products and goods and services, right? Or I think I'm getting that right, or maybe it started as pebbles or something, right? So, but what you and I agree on the value of those things to be didn't always necessarily have to be a standard value, right? Like, or for instance, if everyone in the tribe agreed to use cocoa beans, but, me and Dave are like, hey, let's use like these other things over here and like start like a new inside kind of group. And like, we just trade in these little things. That was allowed back then because there was no centralized authority that basically said, "Whoa, hold on, you're using tea cozies to transfer wealth. That's not allowed because our taxation algorithm doesn't work with tea cozies. It only works with cocoa beans, right?" Like that I think that is a perfect analogy to that tokenized kind of environment. Not to mention the fact that it doubles back into that conversation that we keep having about, all right, how is content delivered to you? And I think the answer is it's not delivered to you. You have to seek it out. Like, you have to find it. There's no algorithm that's like, oh, well, Matt's going to spend an extra 15 minutes on the Hive blockchain or on our front end if he does this. I mean, maybe PeakD or one of the other front ends like has a little bit of that in terms of like recommended posts and things like that. But for the most part, like you said, there's no monopoly on front ends. for the Hive blockchain. And so if I want to create one that serves nothing but cat pictures all day long, I
It
can
would
do
probably
that.
be incredibly popular.
Dude, let's go. Like, I got $5 in my pocket. Let's build one, right? Like,
Totally.
but so I think that's going to be the biggest, I'd say, hurdle that the
Totally.
blockchain world has to get over is how do we find a way of explaining what this amazing thing is to people that are so used to a centralized. I mean, we have the same philosophical issue when it comes to anyone who's anarchist or libertarian or free market in their thinking is like, how do we expose someone who basically has Munchausen syndrome to the beauty of freedom? Like, it's very difficult. It's not an easy thing. But I think that's kind of like the way to get through it. What would you say? So a lot of people, like, I bring up this opportunity and they're like, well, it's too complex. Like, how do I sign up and all this other stuff? And like I said, I'm gonna be doing like a series of videos that are kind of like a how-to. But how can the ecosystem do a better job or is currently working on creating an ease of access to, the blockchain and all of the benefits that come with it?
Yeah. And man, oh man, this is where there is room for improvement.
Yeah.
And one of the probably biggest struggles that we're going to see is in a decentralized environment, who does it? Why do you do it? Why are you motivated to do it? There are no leaders. There's no rules. There's not a boss telling me go do this. So I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's a struggle because you get this ecosystem full of incredibly passionate people who all believe very strongly in their vision and the route that they want to take to get there. And so you have, with the Hive blockchain especially, let's talk about consensus, you have to agree on enough to keep moving forward. And you have to agree on sort of these global wants and needs. But in terms of anybody can make a front end, anybody can access it, anybody can use this information to create a new community. Well, if anybody can do it, you have to make sure that you do it in a way that's easy. And right now, because you have so many options, that's I would say the number one scariest thing for onboarding is you go, I want to sign up to Hive. And then you go to the Hive main website and here are your options. There are options. Yeah. There are a lot of options. Yeah. All of the options are different. Yeah. I don't know what any of the options are. Why are there options? And it's such a paradigm shift. It's such a colossal change in thinking. I want to use this site. I'm going to log into this site. And of course, people are still not quite thinking of, well, you're not logging into the site. You're really joining a network. You're joining this ecosystem and you're unlocking all of these services with one wallet address. Well, that's great, but I don't understand. And it's something once you have an account and you jump in, you actually do. It becomes really easy when you realize, okay, well, I use PeakD every day and I like it. And I'm going to try Splinterlands. I want to play a game. Oh, I use my same login. Cool. Oh, I'm going to go to NFT Showroom and I use the same login. Oh, and all of a sudden it clicks. Great. Yep. But for logging in and you go, I can log in through NFT Showroom or Splinterlands or PeakD or Ecency, or that's really intimidating. And so I think one of the biggest things that we're starting to see getting tackled, again, shout outs to 3Speak and the Leo team and a lot of other team. You think that aspect is what turning away layman? Me too, actually. One of the aspects that's being tackled right now is trying to use existing ecosystems and OAuth, which is open authentication, and sort of the tokens that can be created in your browser to pass information about you or an account, like cookies, basically, using that for simple signups. And so there are some great things about that. It's as simple as I can use my MetaMask or my Twitter account. I can go to the Leo front end, click sign up, and just use my Twitter account to generate a new Hive account. Awesome, fast. The only problem with that, and we're going to see this grow, absolutely. We're going to see more of these integrations that make it easy for you to sort of understand coming from traditional social media to creating an account on next generation social media. Where this causes some trouble is then we think of accounts as the same as Facebook. Say, Facebook is centralized. They hold my password for me. If I forget it, no big deal. They'll reset it. Of course, we know in the blockchain world, and especially when we're talking about crypto and the money, the value inherent in it, not your keys, not your crypto. Key safety, account safety is so incredibly important. It's part of self-sovereignty in general, is taking responsibility for your own wealth or your own whatever. That's just a core self-sovereignty concept. But when you come from an ecosystem like, I understand Facebook, I'm going to use Facebook to make a new Hive account, then you're going to go, I lost my keys. How do I reset them? Well, you don't really. And so I think that's going to be sort of the next sort of big hurdle that's going to make it a lot easier to kind of get less tech savvy people on board, because as many people say, well, we just don't want them in the crypto ecosystem anyways. They'll learn and then we'll get them. That's not true. Because in a lot of ways, Hive isn't trying to solve only the hard money problem that, say, Bitcoin is. That's not what it's all about. There's an aspect of it, and there's certainly a lot of cool financial services that are starting to be built in the Hive ecosystem, and that's going to come. But the sort of meat and potatoes of this blockchain is problems that we have and that need to be solved around social, around the ownership of information in general, and the things that we can build on a fast and feeless blockchain. So that's going to be the biggest hurdle, is kind of embracing people who aren't necessarily tech savvy, but also empowering them to understand what the heck it is they're getting into. Yeah. And part of that will be, let's help them understand self-sovereignty. Because if you understand that you have to protect your keys, then you're also going to start understanding that maybe my relationship with my big bank isn't as healthy as it could be. Or maybe my relationship with politics in general isn't as healthy as it could be. The who's going to build the roads argument. All of a sudden, this is a big shift in how you think about the world in general. And that's one of the most amazing things about crypto and blockchain is it's voluntary. You can get as involved as you want, as hands-off as you want. You can be a giga Chad and just be a mega trader. Or you can start saying, okay, well, here's things in my life that I want to take a little bit more control and a little bit more ownership of, and that's what I'm going to use blockchain for. It's very voluntarist. But getting people sort of that shift in thinking, that first sort of step, taking it needs to be easier. And that's going to be a little bit of a struggle. Boomer proof. Yeah. Yes. Oh, Nicholas. Oh, Nicholas.
Nick's awesome. Nick's part of my New Jersey crew. Nick's actually started. We're in the process of starting. So the first iteration is a Liberty community on the blockchain, and then we have some bigger plans in terms of, like we were talking about, kind of like an NFT solution for the Hive blockchain. But that's a good point. So things like Hive Signer, I think, begin to kind of create a lower friction way for people to access it. Yeah, I think it is important, like you said, for people to understand, like, well, why is it that I have like a half a dozen encryption keys and I have to use a different one for different processes? Yeah. And you're like, well, because it's decentralized. Like if there's one key for everything, first of all, if someone gets that key, you're hosed. Like they get everything, right? And the other aspect of it is just that each one of those processes are separated for a reason. It's so that, like, it's not that it's necessarily siloed, but it's that, you don't want one process to end up polluting another. So like when you transfer Hive or purchase Hive, it needs to be different than, say, when you were powering it up and actually using it on the blockchain to do certain things. And so I think there is an educational process, but you know what? Totally. That's why I'm going to try and do what I can. That's why you're doing what you can in order to kind of bring that message. So I want to say thank you. I want to be respectful of your time. We're going on an hour and 20 minutes. Look, I got to tell you, you're like my Hive blockchain Jedi Master right now. That I'm going to have to continue to come back to you in terms of when something comes up, and maybe we can do this again. If people want to follow you on, your channels, whether it be on the Hive blockchain or anything else, how can they get information about you and follow your efforts?
Yeah, Crimson Cloud will work. One of the big things is I'm not posting a whole lot on the Hive blockchain anymore. And that's always makes people struggle because when I came, like I said, way back at the start of the interview, I started off with this idea, I'm going to be this cool like artist and travel photographer. And I learned that, oh my gosh, no, I'm going to be probably end up being this node runner and community activist. And so that's where I'm at. With that being said, I do live streams myself every week, and I do them via one of the blockchain streaming solutions and also on a Hive powered, we call it a social broadcasting network. It's basically like a radio station that's powered solely by people from the blockchain, and it's at mspwaves.com. So every week I'm live, kind of just like you. And on Saturdays, I actually do a show that is open for questions. We usually interview people from around the blockchain ecosystem, or I literally explain stuff to newbies. So that is always available to you. Otherwise, you can reach out anywhere. Yeah, there you go. So my next show won't be until Saturday next. I'm actually going to be talking to a gentleman who has built some really cool apps, including a Patreon style app on the Hive blockchain. So yeah, there's places that you can find me there, but otherwise, yeah, if you ever want to have another show, let me know. If you have a pile of questions that people want to leave in the comments, you can forward them to me and I can answer them and send them back to you, whatever works for you. Awesome. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun. So thanks for inviting me to come along.
And really quickly, so if people are interested in NFT showroom, it's nftshowroom.com.
Correct.
And it's basically an art gallery, right? So people can buy digital art and own it digitally, and it comes with all of the rights that are associated with that, right?
Yeah, and we actually have different options. So not to kind of start us on a big tangent, but largely ETH right now is dependent on gas fees. And so what that means is as the price of ETH has been rising, scalability is a big thing they're working on with ETH 2.0. But for most people who have discovered the crypto art system, you can't tokenize without a ton of money. You can't buy without a ton of money. It's incredibly slow, and there's a lot of barriers to entry. We realized, hey, the Hive blockchain can do this, and it's fast and it's feeless. So why don't we build a similar solution on a blockchain that can scale and that can make this accessible to everyone? Because the people who are starting to explore art and the way that art is changing the way we think about value and how we understand art, because we don't just go to a gallery and stand there in this giant room with one painting and then offer thousands of dollars in cash anymore. That's not art anymore. Let's do it somewhere that's accessible. With NFT Showroom, you can sign up. We have a pretty quick sign up process. We use either Hive Signer or Keychain. We'll even sponsor accounts. I'll literally help you make an account and secure your keys for free. And you can start tokenizing for as little as like $1 US. Our fees are some of the lowest out there. And it's a great way for you to start exploring what blockchain can do for you if you're interested in art. So yeah, I mean, that's a passion project for me, really. It's a proof of concept of, well, here's something above and beyond the social content side of Hive and the hard money side of Bitcoin. Here is an industry that is being changed by the way that blockchain works, and Hive is perfect for that.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
I
love that. I think the next episode we do in a little while should probably center on crypto art and kind of that ecosystem, because I'm totally interested in that. My wife is actually like a traditional visual artist, but both of my kids, the way they're learning art is the old school way with, canvas and paint and stuff, but also digital art at the same time, that they're kind of like also learning to kind of like mix and match with that too and see what that kind of like hybrid world looks like. So I would love to discuss that as well.
Absolutely.
And Murphy's Law, Matt said, you post that stuff about boomers just as I posted my mom's Facebook picture to show her the value of Hive. To Matt's mother, if you do watch or listen to this program, we are not biased against boomers. We are just understanding that boomer technology and technology that is accessible to certain types, we have to make the new technology translate well for folks that are in that age group. So,
Absolutely.
and I know that that's going to be something that we're going to work on in the future collectively. But look, Krim, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon / evening out there on the west coast of Canada, and we'll definitely have to have you on again. So have a good one. I appreciate it.
Bye.
There are so many reasons to decentralize, whether it's lack of control over your own data, platforms where you are the product and get paid little to no money, or censorship and government oversight into your personal communications. That's why I'm taking a journey to decentralize my social media as well as my life. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check out the Decentralize Everything playlist on this channel. Whether you're curious or looking to decentralize too, I would love your company as I make a move to break free, take control, and decentralize everything.